talked about how our creativity takes courage, today's topic is all about action and how action must follow awareness. Because one of the most common forms of resistance, and I think students, you can relate to this, even for us who are listening here, you can totally relate, but to this force of resistance, it is the force of procrastination. Of delaying things and putting things off and saying the word, bukas na lang yan, tomorrow na lang. Right? Na parang you know that there's something that you want to, that God is asking you to start. There's something that God is wanting you to begin. He's inviting you to this path of creativity, this path of most resistance, and yet you feel this force of procrastination. That's why I love so much the quote po of Jim Rohn. He says, the opposite of perseverance is procrastination. If perseverance means you never quit, procrastination means you never start. Whew. Isa pa ho ha. If perseverance means the desire within to say, I will never give up, I will never quit, then you have on the other end of the spectrum, procrastination, in which you find yourself never starting. You know, here we often say it's important to finish strong. But the problem is, there's so many things that we want to accomplish in our lives. For some of us here, the issue is not about finishing strong. For some of you that are listening right now, your issue is you haven't even started. And here, when people procrastinate, we often hear things like, I'm a perfectionist. If all the conditions of my life were just perfect, then I would be able to do what you're asking, Coach Amber, or what you're saying about being a creative being. I would be able to do that. That maybe, you know, if there was not too many distractions, if there was not too many noise, if there was no people interrupting me, if I had more money, if I had more energy, you know, if I only had more resources, if I only had a different environment, then maybe, Coach Amber, I could get started. Or maybe if I did not have this physical condition or this or that. And we have so many reasons and so many excuses. That's why, like, there was one person who was saying, someday is not a day of the week. And eventually, we tell ourselves tomorrow, and then that today becomes the tomorrow we were talking about, and then eventually, one of these days becomes none of these days. Right? And I think sometimes you have conversations with your friends and your family, and you're inspired and you're hyped up, like, I want to start something new. I want to enter in this new faith adventure that God is calling me, because I know that there is no growth in my comfort zone. And yet we find ourselves saying these words, someday. Or we find ourselves saying these words, one of these days. But I agree, one of these days eventually becomes none of these days. And I think what's really scary about procrastination is that it is a force of resistance that is easiest for us to rationalize. Right? Like, I always mention this to us. One of my favorite quotes from Andy Stanley is when he talks about how humanity, we are masters at the art of self-deception. We know how to deceive ourselves. We know how to rationalize things. We know how to justify things. Excuses are just so easy for us to give. And I think this is one of the reasons why procrastination, it's such a powerful force, because it is the easiest thing for us to rationalize. So Stephen Pressfield, he says, we don't tell ourselves, I'm never going to start this project. Instead, what we say is, I am going to start this project, but I'm just going to start tomorrow. Yan. Coach Amber, I'm not saying I'm never going to do it. All I'm saying is I'm just going to start tomorrow. So it's the easiest for us to rationalize until we delay and we delay and we delay and we put off. Like, I love this scripture in Proverbs chapter 3, verse 27 to 28. It says, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, come back tomorrow and I'll give it to you, when you already have it with you. Like, I was talking to some of our young people, that I was mentioning to them the importance of the principle, doing what you have doing the best of what you have with what you have right now. Right now, that phrase, right now, I think is so important. And I think perhaps there's an area of our life where God has been prompting you to grow, where God has been prompting you to stretch, where God has been prompting you to study something new. Like again, as I mentioned po, the unemployment rates po in this country have been rising for the first time again since I think a couple weeks ago. For some of us here sitting down and you were just recently laid off. For some of us here, you were just furloughed. For some of us here, perhaps your job has become even busier since the pandemic began. And maybe for some of us here, you're like what Jenny Blake says in the book Pivot, where you're really seriously thinking about shifting career paths. So wherever you are at this time of your career journey, at this time of where you are in terms of building your Eden and taking care of the field that God has entrusted to you, then maybe this is a time in which God is prompting a lot of us to grow, to stretch, to surrender, but yet we find ourselves delaying and putting things off. Perhaps it's like in the area of saying later to refocusing on the relationships of developing deep connections with the people around us. Or maybe we say later when it comes to seeking help with a destructive behavior in our own lives. Or maybe we find ourselves easily saying later to reconciling with a friend, to beginning a new venture, to learning a new skill, or to starting a new creative expression. So bottom line, we find ourselves promising God, I'll do it, but Lord, I'll do it later. Right? Like, God, I'm not saying no. Like this path that you're showing before me, it's a path in which I know it will require faith, but God, I'm not saying no. All I'm saying is later. I'll do it later. And maybe po, this is a really good time po, for all of us to really kind of sit back and really reflect. Like, what are those areas in our lives in which we find ourselves telling God, saying, later, Lord, mamaya na yan. And I think what Vance Hayner po, what he said is so beautiful, especially when it comes to allowing action to follow awareness. He says the vision must be followed by venture. Again, if God has given you a vision of where your family should be 5-10 years from now, a vision of where you are in your career path, of how you are uniquely contributing to the community around you, allowing your heart to stretch so that everything of who you are, all your resources is in connection with serving the people around you. If you are at this point where God has given you a vision for your life, then vision must be followed by venture. Awareness of what God is asking you to do must be followed by action. It is not enough to stare up the steps. We must step up the stairs. Again, it is not enough for us to look up and say, wow, what an incredible journey to be able to climb up those stairs. No, it is not enough for us to just see the stairs, to stare up the stairs. We must have the courage to step up the stairs.
Thank you again for watching our YouTube videos. We hope that these messages encourage you and inspire you to move forward within your life. If you have further discussions or want to have further discussion, we have questions right below in our description box, so just click that. And we believe here that life is better connected, so feel free to share the content, like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you get further notifications on what we're doing here and the messages to come. So with that, thank you for watching our videos. We'll see you again.